Hi, everybody, and welcome to our October RV Repair Club Q&A live session. I can't believe it's October already, and we had our first little dip below freezing. We had some frost the other night, so it is actually here. Had a pretty busy week. It's been kind of fun. A lot of questions coming in. Some of the exciting things that we're working on is with RVIA and their RV Training Institute. We're putting together, hopefully, an inspections course and a PDI course for owners at some point. We're getting a lot of questions coming in that people are buying new and used RVs and are not getting really good walkarounds of those, or even if they do, you remember about 10% is kind of what they say. But anyway, we're working on that to be able to roll that out at some point in time here. But it's kind of fun seeing the people that are getting ready to go south for the winter, and the other ones that are getting ready to put their units away for the winter. So we got two different completely types of RVers out there. So with that, we'll get started answering some of the questions here. I see we've got quite a few that have come in to start with. So I'm going to get up here and go up to the top. And it looks like we have the first question. John Lupton said that my 15 amp awning AC auto fuse keeps on burning out. Almost every 5 to 10 days, I keep having to change it out. The first time it happened, my EMS surge protector was only pushed into the 50 amp circuit about halfway. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but it has been causing problems ever since. And then he goes on to say the blue LED light switch for my oven started smoking. That looks like an entirely different process here. So I guess the first thing I would start with, John, is if you had your EMS, if it's a surge guard, I would definitely get in touch with surge guard and see if there's something with that unit that should be looked at or diagnosed. Normally what the surge guard will do will give you an actual blinking in a lot of those if there's something wrong with it. But if it's blowing out your 15 amp awning / AC auto fuse, and now that's a little concerning to me too, because the awning is usually not hooked up to the 12 volt engine system like the AC auto would be. And if it's your door awning or your side patio awning and it's an electrical one, it's going to be hooked up to a 12 volt DC circuit in your house batteries, and your auto AC should be on a completely chassis fused block, again with 12 volt DC, but running from your engine battery supplied by that. So they should be two separate systems. But and at some point you may have you probably got a wire touching somewhere, and that is a really hard thing to diagnose because you've got wires running along chassis rails. You've got wires. It could be somebody during the installation, and you didn't say what year this unit was. But one screw going into the side panel of something could just clip a wire enough to create a short in there, and it could be that it doesn't happen until you make a right-hand turn. I've seen some really weird things happening in that. So I guess my recommendation would be, first of all, to track those down and make sure that it can't. I guess I back up there. I won't say it can't, but it shouldn't be that your awning fuse is on the same circuit as your AC auto, your automotive AC. So with that, I would try and track those down and figure out what's causing it. Again, that is one of those gremlins that you just basically got to get in and track the wiring down. It's not something that's very common. If anybody else has come into that, please let me know. And so then John also said the blue LED light switch for my oven started smoking. I ordered a new part that included the switch, and when I plugged it in, it actually blew the fuse in the panel that controlled the entire slide outlets, which I had to change out. Do I need new wires that hardwire from the switch to the back of the oven, or a new oven? Please advise. And again, here's two separate different power sources. So on your LED lights for your oven, that is run by the 12 volt house circuit, and I ordered a new part that included a switch. Then I plugged it in. It actually blew fuses on the panel that controlled the entire slide outlets. Okay, so your outlets they're 120 volt outlets. And so you've got 12 volt that's running your oven with LP, of course, but then you've got now 120 volt that it blew the fuse to those two. So my thought is that the outlets that you have on the slide room could possibly be hooked to your inverter that is getting power off the 12 volt battery. So maybe you've got something with your inverter that's going wrong, because those plugins on that outlet side should be 120 volts. Now, I have seen several units that have come across here lately where they got a solar panel that goes and it charges up the house batteries and an inverter, and the inverter is connected to 4 of the outlets inside. It's not connected to the distribution center, but they're still getting 120 volt power. So I think you've got quite a bit of wiring issues that are going on here, and you know, I can't say you need to run a new hardwire to the switch to the back of the oven. I wouldn't do that, because again, your oven's going to be, from what I understand, if it's a propane LP oven, it's going to take 12 volt to run the switch, and an LED light switch for my oven. So, and unless you're talking about your microwave convection oven, then that would definitely be 120 volt and plugged into an outlet, and again, but that typically should not be part of your inverter. So there's a lot of, we need a lot more information going on. I think that's it would be a good question to pose into our question and answer social media stuff, and make sure you get the make and the model and the year of the RV that you're talking about, and a little more specific about the oven. Is it the actual LP oven underneath, or are you talking about a microwave convection oven, or do you have a 120 volt oven in your rig, which is not too common, but again, I never say never anymore, because we're seeing a lot of residential stuff being brought into RVs anymore, and so it's kind of hard to dissect some of that stuff until you know exactly what everything is in it. So if you can give a little more information on those and post it, we can do a little more diagnostics and digging into it. Scott Firestone said, I cover my Class C for the winter. Should I run the chassis, engine, and generator every month? I do have stabilizer in the gas. You don't really need to run your chassis engine, but they do recommend, Onan does recommend running the generator once a month under load, so you're looking to try and get 30 amp circuit out of that thing. And normally that's running a roof air conditioner, which sounds silly in the middle of wintertime, but what happens is the gas starts to break down and it will varnish inside the fuel system in there, and then you'll have trouble getting it started. Now, you can do a process where you run it out of gas, and then you run some of their stabilizer stuff through it, and then you run that stuff out so there's nothing in the gas line and the carburetor. That's a little difficult to do, but check your owner's manual if you want to do that. Otherwise, once a month, I would go down and just run the generator and, have for half an hour and get something on that makes it put a load on it, because, just running it is going to actually make it worse. It's going to varnish more and more. So you want to put some kind of load on it, make it work. I parked my Class C. So this is Scott also, I believe. I parked my Class C on a gravel driveway. Should I put wood under the tires for winter storage? And this is kind of, there's been a lot of debate on storing RVs in the wintertime as far as tires. Should I get the weight off the tires of it because it flattens the bottom of them? And, the tire manufacturers have kind of gone back and forth in their recommendations. Originally, they said get the weight as much as you can so you're not flattening it and it doesn't hurt the steel belts inside. And then they went away from that. And, there's been a lot of discussion. The only thing that I have seen recently, talking with Trey Seelman from the RV Safety and Education Foundation, who does an enormous amount of work with the tire manufacturers, Walter Cannon before that, in Michelin, they do recommend, if you're going to park it on a surface like a blacktop or something that there could be some kind of chemical that would leach up into it, tar from blacktop or whatever, that you should put a piece of board, non-treated, underneath it, so that you don't have anything that can leach up into it. I personally, every time we stored our rig in the parking lot, they had a lot of pretty good sized rocks in it, and so we always put a flat board underneath it, just because there was a lot of sharp edges in that. I never had any evidence that it would do that. I've never had anybody else say it, but I just noticed when I walked through there. I mean, sometimes my feet hurt even in just walking. I thought, I just don't feel comfortable putting pressure from a sharp edge of a rock on the sidewall of a tire, because one of the things that we found with all the testing that Goodyear and Michelin has done through RV Safety Education and Foundation is that when you have a tire failure, it's very hard to pinpoint what caused the failure originally. It could be something months, a year ago, something that it happened to the sidewall that you weakened it, and eventually it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so there are times where something like that, it doesn't hurt. So if it's on gravel, I would say that nothing documented, but in my opinion, I feel safer doing it that way. Paul says, do you have a schedule to let me know in advance when you have these live discussions? We've got the next 2 months scheduled out, and typically they will send out posts on the Facebook thing, so join that. I know that we are next month. We are scheduled for November, and maybe Katie can post it in our Welcome Everyone live session here, because we're looking at about, I believe it's the 21st of November, and then we've got December set up as well. So if Katie could post those, I would appreciate that. And then Scott can get that, or Paul can get that. So, but we'll get those posted for you. Okay. Scott again says, whoops, let me get my... Should I leave my Class C plugged in with the smart charger converter trickle charger on my house battery, or take the battery out? You can do either one. We've had a lot of discussion on batteries. If it's a lead acid battery, the biggest issue you can have with lead acid is not conditioning it properly. If you just leave a trickle charger on it, it's not going to break up the sulfation in it, and that's going to attack the plates and get thicker, and you're going to have less amp hours out of your battery available. And so you need a multi-stage, and you call it a smart charger converter trickle charger, which are different things, because a smart charger is going to do a multi-stage charge. It's going to do like a 14.6 volt charge. It's going to break up that sulfation, then it's going to go down to 13.6 until your battery gets up to 12.6, and then it's going to go down to 13.2. And so you got a bulk, a float, and an equalizing charge that keeps that battery conditioned and the sulfur broken out. A trickle charge is just going to simply do a 2 amp charge at 13.2 to make sure when your battery starts to drain down naturally during the wintertime, you've got an LP leak detector that's going to draw a little bit out of it, and it will just naturally drain down a little bit. That keeps it charged, but it doesn't break up sulfation. It's not terrible to do that. You just have to remember that 3, 4, 5, 6 months on just that trickle charger, you're going to have some sulfation on it, so you're going to have to do some conditioning afterwards. I like, if you have access to electrical, you don't have to take the battery out. It's a good idea to get a conditioner. So Charge Wizard is one that's out there. Battery Minder, not Battery Tender. Battery Tender is just a 2 amp trickle charger, but if you have a Battery Minder from Northern Tool or somebody like that, it will send high impact waves in and condition your batteries. So if you have access to electricity, I would say plug it in and use that battery minder to condition your batteries. Okay. Scott says, what are the best tire valve extensions for a dually Class C? And that is, there are a variety of out there. Wheelmaster makes a really good one that I have seen before, and I guess I haven't kept up on the valve extensions as much anymore, rather than looking at tire pressure monitoring systems, and being able to check the pressure from the tires. But you're right. If you got a duals that you can't get at, then you definitely need some extensions. But I would look at the Wheelmaster product that's out there. And I guess that's something I'll have to do a little bit more research on it. I know that there were some other ones. The thing that you got to be very careful about with valve extensions is you want to research the ones that the stem goes all the way down to the valve to open and close the valve. Meaning if I ever get that thing cut in the center of it, I don't lose air pressure. It literally pushes a post that goes down. So if it does get sliced up, it's not going to let the air out. Some of the earlier ones, I know when I was at Winnebago, we'd never put valve. There were over a 50% failure rate going down the road. The simulator, they call it, it's the wheel, the stainless steel pretty plate that goes on the rim shifts. No matter how well it's torqued, it's still going to shift with movement, with temperature changes, braking, all that kind of stuff. And it will eventually just literally slice some of those valve extensions out. Now I know they do have some now that with the bracket that brings it out a lot further. So those are probably okay to use, but that is definitely something that you want to make sure you get something that's not a hollow all the way. Otherwise, you will lose air. So John says, after we talked about his stove and a various, he has a 2021 Montana 312 RL. I forgot to empty my kitchen. Oh, is that the same John, or am I looking at? Yeah. Okay. Montana 3121 RL. I forgot to empty my kitchen sink gray tank, and it filled up into my sink. It also dropped the gray tank, and either the pipe or grommet on the top of the tank came loose and caused a water leak that dripped into my undercarriage. I was able to fix that leak by clamping the gasket, applying Silcoflex sealant, and installing support brackets for the tank. However, it also leaking inside my bathroom and onto the floor. I noticed the water coming in around the toilet's floor seal. And now he continues, John, you're a busy man. But, okay, is this from an overflow tank, or is it a completely different problem? I also noticed that when the toilet is initially flushed, an air bubble pushed the water and paper up. There is a pop, and then it goes down the pipe, almost like air is being let in from below. So let's talk about the toilet thing first. And I think what might be happening in your toilet is that, and it's hard to tell without getting in and looking at this stuff, because I'm kind of guessing on how your plumbing's going, and all of these things run different, and there's so many different configurations that you have and they do. But all your holding tanks have to have a vent, some type of a vent tube that allows the air, anti-siphoning basically. It has an air vent that keeps it from vacuuming. So when you go to drain, it'll flow out with air coming in rather than sucking. So you might have a plugged vent. If it's bubbling up like that and not flowing very well, it might be caused by your holding tank, your gray water tank. Sometimes they connect the two of them as one T and vent it up to the top. So if this one pulled out and for some reason compromised the vent of your black water tank, then you would get bubbling like that. So that's, and it's very possible the vent up at the top is plugged, or if your black tank is underneath a countertop, you might have a cheater vent, what's called, it's an anti-siphoning vent, because they can't take the vent all the way up to the ceiling because you have an open countertop here. So they bring it up underneath the counter, and then they just put this rubber gasketed cap on it, and it's supposed to allow air to come in, but none of the exhaust, the smell, the gases to come out of it, and those go bad. They don't have much of a lifespan. If you take a look in the archives of the video, look for the Raptor that we had a cheater vent. There was a sewer vent right up underneath, and this is a $70-some thousand toy hauler, and it was about a year and a half into it, and it started smelling really bad. So that could be the vent problem that you're having. The gray tank, now I don't know that if you overflow a gray tank, overfill it, and it's coming back up out of the sink, that it would cause it to drop like that. That to me doesn't make any sense, because I don't know, how many of us have filled our gray water tank at the shower and then got up, all of a sudden we had standing water in the shower and went, uh-oh, we didn't fill that tank. They should be able to support the weight of that holding tank. You got a 50-gallon holding tank. Your water weighs 6.5 gallons per, or 6.5 pounds per gallon approximately. And then you got a little bit of piping that goes up. But once you see it standing in the sink, I don't think you would have 5 or 6 pounds, of extra water from that overflow. So I don't think it probably was caused by the overflow, other than the fact that a lot of these tanks, it's a Montana. I would assume that it's suspended underneath, not held up by a false floor. So I guess the first thing, since it's a 2021, I would definitely get in touch with the dealer or Montana. Keystone's a great company to work with. I contact their tech support all the time to help with questions on stuff like that. They can send you plumbing diagrams if you need them, but I would definitely get in touch with them and document it first, because this might be something covered under warranty. And then the second thing I would do is just get inside. You did have a chance to say to clamping, you got most of it sealed. You notice water coming in around the toilet. So again, I don't think it's an overflow from the tank as much, because it should be able to hold the weight of that. So anyway, again, it's hard to tell because the plumbing's so different. So then John also goes into, regarding my range/oven, I have a 21. It is an electric/propane oven range. It's Suburban that came new with the unit. Okay. So with that, again, 2021, you should still be under warranty. That's definitely something I would get in touch with Keystone to start with, either your dealer or Keystone owner relations department, to get it documented, because most of those appliances are covered for 2 years. So even if you're slightly out of warranty, you should be able to get some assistance with that. So take a look at that. And Scott said that his is a multi-stage charger. That is good. So I would just leave it charged in. I've definitely shut everything else off but the charger in it. Just make sure nothing else is running. Okay, and so Katie came on and said, next month we're scheduled for Tuesday, November 30th at 5 p.m. Central Time. And then in December, we are at Monday, December 20th at 4 p.m. Central Time. And we always post these on social media prior to going live and sending out emails. I know I'm on the Facebook page, and I do see that the day of. I don't see I did see it 2 days earlier. So anyway, look for those. But those are the dates that we have set up, and barring anything emergency-wise coming up, we'll stay with those. And we do have a gold event, I believe, on the November 30th. That we are scheduling as well. So if any of you are gold members, then we'll see you there. So Judy says, apparently I have sewer flies in my gray tank. I never heard them called sewer flies, but that doesn't sound fun. The valves are only open when dumping, but I do have sewer connection. Any suggestions? Never fought them before, but I am constantly battling small flies and gnats. And I would say, fruit flies are, man, they are some of the hardest things to get rid of and find and whatever. But I don't think that they're necessarily coming inside or in through the gray water tank in any way. But fruit flies, from what I have seen, they nest in cold areas, drains of, especially kitchen drains, because not only is it moist but there's also food, that for them, the junk, whatever it is. So I guess the best thing that I could recommend is there are several products out in the market. I would leave the sink traps down pour some of the bleach and stuff in there, get that good and cleaned out. And then if you get the little traps that actually plug the drain down in there, because you may not see it, but they're around other places, and then they go down in there at night. And I know how many times that I've opened, put on the water faucet, and all of a sudden they come flying out, and they are some of the most annoying things that you can have. And you probably see more of them now because they're coming from the outside to get in where it's a little warmer at. There's a lot of products out on the market, the fruit fly and gnat traps. Some of the best stuff I've seen is to take a little bit of vinegar or wine and make a little cone out of paper. You just take a piece of paper. Can't believe I don't have a piece of paper here. And I'll just make it into a cone. I think I've got one here. Here we go. So you just get a fruit jar and just make a little cone like this. And you want to get it kind of nice and tight down at the bottom, and then just tape this off and cut it off into a funnel. And you get it tight enough that they can get in, but then it's almost impossible for them to get out. So pretty easy to do. You can buy a variety of different fruit fly and gnat traps on Amazon and various different places. But and then there are chemicals. If you want to spray some chemical stuff out there, there are some natural remedy deterrents too. I haven't really come across them. We've just done the traps. It seems that keep the doors closed and put the food away. Eventually we can get rid of them. But they are a battle. I agree. So Rhoda says, when should I winterize my Class A motorhome? I live in North Carolina and I plan to travel to Florida in January for 2 months. And the time you want to winterize, you're getting really close. The thing about winterizing, the most critical thing is to get the water out of the system before it freezes. Because if you let it sit and it gets below freezing and it freezes in the pipes and it freezes in your water heater, it's going to burst the tank in the heater and it's going to pop the lines in it. If you have AquaHot, also, that's another thing that it runs through the system and you could burst the boiler in your AquaHot system. So the main thing in winterizing is to make sure you check your temperature levels, and when it starts to look like it's going to get below freezing for a night, I would definitely get it done. Whether you use RV antifreeze or you blow the system out with air, that's the main thing to do. Get the water out of there. If you're going to take it down to Florida in January, if you're in North Carolina, I know you hit some freezing weather down there as well. So, or over there, I guess we're in Iowa, but that's the main thing. Robert asks, how important is it to cover my trailer in northern Michigan winter when you see all the RVs stored outside, all dealerships and manufacturers? The biggest thing that covering an RV does, well, there's a few things. First of all, you cover it, you keep all the direct sunlight off of it through a harsh winter and times where it does start to get warm and everything. It keeps all the sealants pliable. It keeps the decals from fading and curling and cracking, and it keeps the sidewall from getting fading, UV degradation. The other thing it does is it keeps the snow and ice off of the unit itself that can thaw and freeze. Because one of the worst things that I've seen with units sitting outside, if they don't have a real good slope and it snows outside, you get this heavy snow on top of it for a long period of time, and then it starts to melt, but then it freezes again, and then so you get this ice cake up there, and you got this heavy stuff sitting on the roof, and every time ice expands and contracts in there, it works at the underneath the air conditioning unit, and it drips into the sealants. And if you get any cracks in your sealants, it's going to get in there and start to pry it away. So in my opinion, a cover is good. ADCO makes a great cover that a lot of people have been using for years, and they're very, very inexpensive, really. I've spec'd one out for a guy that was, I think he had a 32-foot Class A motorhome, and it was $450. To me, that was, that was a great deal. Oliver says, hi, Dave. I have a Vanguard. Hi, Oliver. I have a Vanguard 2000 VXL. Because the gray holding tank is really shallow, the shower never fully drains down the P-trap. Water remains standing about 4 inches down the drain. I'm assuming this is the P-trap. I've tried natural and chemical cleaners, augers, etc., but there was no change, so I don't think this is a blockage per se. My question is, how should I blow the P-trap with air until it goes into the holding tank, or just fill it up with antifreeze during the winter storage? Well, the first one, I don't think there's a P-trap in the shower area of that. You typically see the P-traps mostly just in the sinks, and the showers drain straight down, the toilet drains straight, and not straight, I mean, sometimes they're at an angle, sometimes there's a little bit of a curve, but definitely not a P-trap, because in both the shower and the stool, especially the stool, you don't want a P-trap because you don't want any sewage sitting in there, because that's going to stink coming back up. The idea of a P-trap is with a freshwater sink. It comes down and it does the P like this, and so water sits in that bevel, or the P part of it, and that water acts as a plug. So all the smell from the underlying sewer system. Now, some manufacturers will take a kitchen sink or a bathroom sink and dump it into the black water tank because it's close, the proximity of it. So not every sink drains into gray water with the shower, but the shower drains into the gray water. But sinks can be totally different. So you definitely want a P-trap in those, because your water's going to be fresher. It's not going to be as stinky in there, and it's going to sit in that P and block all those odors from coming back up. So you think about your shower, and even though it's cleaner water, you still got soap, and you've got some stuff that could start to get kind of stagnant and smelly. You wouldn't want that sitting in a P-trap either. So I don't think you have a P-trap issue as much as you have some kind of a blockage issue with that. And it's very possible, I'm not familiar with the Vanguard product specifically, and again, everybody's plumbing is totally different, but it is very possible that in the manufacturing of that, somehow they either kinked the hose coming down, which is hard to believe, but if they get it at a goofy angle, it doesn't work right. It's also possible that somehow it shifted, or your vent is plugged. So when it's coming in, it's got all this air, and the air is trying to get out while the water comes in, and it's not doing it fast enough. So it's building up. But I think the first thing I wouldn't blow air. I wouldn't use air to go into there, because you don't know what that's hooked to. So all of a sudden you could have a vent in that thing that's hooked to your black water tank, and then you shoot black water. I wouldn't do that. The auger thing, I think, is okay. You might want to get some industrial drain cleaner and put down there, and just make sure it's okay for plastic piping. Most of that stuff is okay, because you see a lot of your houses today are using the same type of piping, plastic, PVC, sewer pipes, Schedule 40 stuff, in their homes as we're using in RVs. So you can use some of that drain cleaner, and I would try a little bit of that first before getting too crazy, and then you might have to get in and just start taking a look at what's happening. Maybe take the strainer plate out of that unit, and you might have already done that if you've done the auger. So and sometimes they are just designed wrong. I've seen a lot of cases where people have come in and said, well, this won't drain, or this won't fill, or this won't whatever, and getting into it further, they found that whenever they placed the holding tank or the freshwater tank, whatever, in a location, that the flow of the piping of it didn't allow it to go fast enough, and there is no fix for it, which is unfortunate because, you know, that doesn't happen very often. But one of the things I've learned is never say never in the RV industry. And it, you know, one of the things is, or should I just fill it up with antifreeze during the winter storage? You don't need to fill it up with antifreeze. You know, I would say just you should look at you know, how much water is in there. You should be able to drain it. The shower never fully drains down the P-trap. So here's another possibility that you can do. So you could put antifreeze in it during the wintertime. But one of the things too is I would try an auger from both directions. Go down the shower drain on one aspect of it, and go from the other side, and you know, just make sure that you've tried it from both directions, because you may have plugged somewhere that you think you're going all the way through, and check your valve. You know, is your gray water tank valve opening all the way? Which, you know, you should still get it to flow completely, drain, but I would try those things. And then you can put antifreeze in it, but I would still, you should be able to get it to drain. Mike says, my main Class A is parked on a 6-inch slope. Oops, where's my, I get down here to see the rest of this. My Class A is parked on a 6-inch slope on the driver's side. For winter storage, is that okay, or should I raise the side? You know, I don't think that's bad. You know, as long as you're not running the refrigerator, that's one of the big critical things on being level with it. The only other thing I would be concerned about is if you have slide rooms in that unit. You know, a 6-inch drop is not terrible, but you don't know what it's doing to the chassis. You don't know what it's doing to the sidewall. And, you know, one of the things that we learned at Winnebago when we were testing for slide room installation, we started in the early 90s, and we worked with HWH. We did over 14,000 extensions and retractions, and we took units out on the test track. And Winnebago has their own test facility, and they've got this long test track, and it's got sine waves that just completely rock and roll the unit. They put it up on vibrators just to see what happens when you start getting some of those conditions where you're going to get out of level. And the biggest thing we found with the slide room mechanism is that if you don't have a level foundation and it's stable, then you get twisting in the chassis, which means you get twisting in the sidewall, and you're going to have trouble with that slide out. In fact, we did a little demonstration when I was training dealers around the country, and then even after, when I left and did some video production, we were comparing units. We took a chassis and we drove it up on, it was probably about a 10-inch ramp. You know, it's those car ramps that you can drive up on and work underneath it. And we drove one wheel up and just showed how that chassis twisted in that. And so that was a bare chassis we took, and then we did a comparison of the one of the models that we were videotaping, and drove it up on it, and the slide room still worked, and the compartment doors were all there. Took another model, a competitive model, drove it up there without even doing anything to it. The door all of a sudden popped open, and the compartment doors. So that tells you how much that chassis twists. So if you got a slide room in that thing, you know, a couple slide rooms or so, it might be a good idea to bring that up. You know, you won't know it until 3-4 years down the road, probably, if it twisted something. But I think that, you know, that might be right on the verge of wanting to do something and get it a little more level. Gary says, Dave, I've always wondered why manufacturers did not put tank monitors new your dump valves instead of running around the rig and going inside to see if the tank is really drained. Oh, okay. So why don't they put the actual readers, the monitors, on the outside? And do you know, or have you ever installed a redundant monitor by splicing into the existing wiring system? Seems like a fairly easy task. Any comments? You know, that's a fairly, I think it's a good idea. The reason that you want to do that is because your monitor panel's not reading correctly. And that's the real problem, is that when you go to dump that tank, and if those monitors are not reading correctly, then you got to run outside and see, is it really open? Because you don't trust your monitors. And that's a very common problem, because we did a little bit of a demo here last time where we've got probes in there. And what happens, in fact, I'm going to bring that up and just let you see what this looks like. So I got a little creative last month, and I made my own little dump tank. And so, or holding tanks. So here are your typical monitors that we've simulated. So what happens is this is a power supply. This is a power supply that comes into that. And as the water level raises up here, it arcs across to this one that tells the monitor inside that I'm 1/3 full. And as the water comes up, it arcs across here, and it says, I am 2/3 full. And it hits here, and it says, I am full. So when you go to dump that, then you think automatically that, okay, everything is out of it, and the monitor panel should operate properly. But what happens is that on the side of this thing, and I didn't simulate that last time in here, and you won't be able to see this too easily, but I'm going to open this up. So now what happens is we get a lot of scum on the side of this, mostly in the black water tank. That's the big area, because we've got sewage, we've got toilet paper, we've got all kinds of stuff going on in here that even though you dump this, you can still get a slime off the side of this, or you can get toilet paper. So you still get a false reading in here. That's why, in my opinion, it's really important to get yourself one of the black water flush tanks. And I know I just went out of frame here, but I wanted you guys to see that. The black water flush valve will actually just spin and pressurize water into those monitor panels and clean that whole sidewall. Another product that you can get that works really well is Tank Blaster. This is a Thetford product that has come out that has really been doing a nice job with black and gray water holding tanks and cleaning them out really well. And get the right chemicals and get the right toilet paper. So if you can get your monitors to read properly and clean those sidewalls of them, you don't need anything outside, to do that. And the other thing, I guess, I look back and I say, okay, if I'm dumping the tanks and I'm outside, how do I know the tanks are empty? The other thing that I do then as well is a clear elbow or connector at the bottom. That tells me definitely that they're done, that it's, I do the black water tank 2 or 3 times, at least 2 times, but this will tell me, you'll be amazed, you dump that one time and you go back and you fill the thing back up and you dump it again, you'll be amazed at how filthy that still is, even though you thought you got everything out of it. So, I don't know that I think what happens in most cases is people want to see what the level of the tanks is when they're inside the unit most of the time. You're camping, you're inside, and all of a sudden you think, well, do we need to dump the tanks yet? Rather than running outside to look at it, because manufacturers aren't going to put them in both places most of the time. And even though it seems like a minor amount, it's still, they're set in their ways usually. So, it might be something that it's one of those flugel binders that we call it, that all of a sudden is worth $1 million. So if that happens, I'll come see you. Guest asks, hi, I just wondering if you will be showing people how to reconstruct their cabs that rotten from water damage for a 1983 Midas Freeport. And we don't have that much time to show that. That is a major undertaking to reconstruct the tab. One of the things you can do, though, is George from the Woodworkers Guild of America has been working on a 97 Forest River Salem, and it had some massive water damage in the back, coming down the walls. from the roof down the seam of the wall. It ruined the framing in the sidewall. It ruined the flooring section of it. So that would be very similar to what you're seeing in yours. And you said it was a 93 Midas Freeport, and I'm not sure, or 83 Midas Freeport Reconstructor cabs. That rod. So if it's the overhead cab of that, that's a very common thing in those older units like that, because the seal between the cab and the actual and if it's an 83, you probably have a Dodge Class C cab. It might be a Ford, but there was kind of both of them were available. But I think Midas's were a lot of them were built on a Dodge, and then you've got the bunk cab that goes over the top of that. And so with that, and again, I'm assuming it's a Class C only because you said cab, but anyway, you get water in that, you can ruin that entire deck, the side panels of that thing. And but at least if you take a look at George's reconstruction and renovation project of that trailer, you'll get a good idea of how you go to approach that stuff and replacement materials. But it's a very labor intensive process. Bob says, does it cause undue stress to leave your leveling jacks deployed for weeks at a time? And I don't think it does. This has been a question that's been I wouldn't say argued, discussed, quite a bit. When people put them in storage, it said, should I leave the jacks down? HWH says you can. Lippert doesn't really say much of anything in it. Some people like to put the jacks down to level it out. Some people like to put the jacks down to get the weight off the tires. Some people say that, well, you can't have the weight on those jacks for 6 months. Well, what about somebody that's full timing and staying in a spot for 6 months? I know a lot of people that have permanent places for their RVs, fifth wheels especially. There's a spot out of town. There's probably 125 or more fifth wheels and trailers that park there all the time, all year round, and their jacks are down all the time. So I don't think there's any problem with that. The only thing I would recommend is just inspect them periodically for whatever kind of weathering you could get on those. So you got a nice jack stem that comes down on that thing that is exposed. So once in a while you might have to clean it off, spray a little lubricant. I like to do the silicone lubricant and then wipe it off. HWH recommends WD-40 and wiping it off. That most of them don't recommend WD-40, but that is something that you should be able to do that. But then look at just take a look at it, inspect them once in a while. Okay, does it do under stress? So Rhoda said thank you, and Oliver said thank you, and John said thank you. Well, I'd like to say thank you guys for coming in here too and participating with this. And John Hank, is that why the jacks are engaged and not independent? Are ganged and not independent? No, his question is, why are the jacks ganged and not independent? And most companies will gang their jacks two at a time, and that keeps you from doing one jack at a time and racking that bottom. So if you're doing two jacks, the whole front end is going to come up together. It's not going to come up like this and bend everything underneath. If you do the side, the whole side comes up. And so that's why they gang the jacks, in situations like that. Now, some jacks will do all four at one time. The HWH ones, you could do the front, the backs, the sides, but you couldn't do individual jacks. And they're pressure sensitive. So let's say you're out of level and you do the two front ones and this one comes down first. It's not going to keep until this one comes down. Once it hits a certain pressure and this one isn't down yet, this one will stop until it pressurizes this, and then they'll come up together. So that's why your jacks are ganged, to keep you from racking that suspension or anything underneath it. Don says, what is the easiest way to install a cover on a fifth wheel? Get a lot of friends and a 12-pack of beer, because there is no easy way, just because of the height of something like that. I do think it is, it's a good thing to do. And, the better cover you buy, like the Adco covers, that they're form fitted a little easier, that they have a tendency to be able to slide on and then zip up and Velcro places in stages that you can do it. But, there's no magic pill to drop it off the top of it. So it's basically just working it over. Look at the obstacles that you have. The stairs, if they come up over the back top, that's always a grabber. Your air conditionings, anything on the rooftop is harder to do. So some of them have a little more open front where you can start from the back and pull and then zip. So you almost are able to tilt it up a little bit to not have to form it over the front in one piece. Here's the link to the RV trailer. Okay, and great, Katie, thank you. She put the link to George's makeovers to the RV thing. And whoops, we got Brett asks how to replace the awning gas strut. The replacement strut needs to be compressed to fit. Is there a tool to compress the strut? Any advice would be helpful. Brett, that's one. I'm assuming you've got a Lippert Solero, an electric one. There's a strut on that, and that's one of the things that I would refer you to Lippert. They got a great customer service department. They can walk you through it, and the biggest thing about that is you really need to be careful about the tension that comes on that and what can spring out of it. I would say the shock is easier to replace. And there is a tool for that, and then I'm just assuming it's Lippert. If it's Colorado, Carefree Colorado, they're great to work with as well. I've talked with Lippert a lot on a lot of the different awning products, but the biggest issue is making sure you understand what tension is in there and how to secure that properly, because I've seen some of those things take off. In fact, Steve, I didn't see the worst of it. Steve actually saw one of the technicians at Winnebago when they were putting a new coil spring in the A&E arm itself, or mechanism tube, almost rip a guy's hand off. And luckily he was close enough. They saved his hand, but there are some horror stories. So I would recommend whoever your awning person is, those are things that you really need to work with that company and find out what they recommend, and just so you know and feel comfortable with it. So I don't just normally put that stuff out to just be careful. So anyway, okay. My rear L jack had a lot of oil pooling on the pad once I retract my jacks. Should I be concerned? Yeah, well, not concerned, but what you've got is a leak in the seal. So somewhere, most of those jacks, almost everybody is owned by Lippert now. So you can get a seal kit and put in there. So what's happening is you've got a seal that the hydraulics is pushing these jacks, and you depending on the amount of it, to just keep checking your lines and your reservoir and what you have in that, and keep that at a full level. But eventually you want to replace that seal in there, and then you have to decide if you feel comfortable that you can do that. It is it's not difficult. It just takes the right tools and take the jack off and all that stuff. So Tim says, I have a 2017 Winnebago View, and the slide out does not pull in completely on the lower left side. The top pulls in tight, but the bottom does not. Is there a way to adjust it so it pulls in tight on all four corners? And so I don't know what kind of slide mechanism you have. If it's a Schwintek, then the way that operates, it's got two motors up in the top, and then it's got two gears on the bottom. So you got motors up here, gears down here, and they both travel on a rail. So if the room comes out and you see this rail with these teeth in it, that is a Schwintek. And what happens with the Schwintek is they get out of sync. And what you're supposed to do with those is you hit the button, and when the room extends and it hits out fully extended, you keep the button on. And that's not what most people do. They think that, oh, it's done, I don't want to burn the motor out. it needs to sync itself because you got different weights in that slide room. And one of the unfortunate things, I've spent a lot of time working with a Schwintek engineer because we get a ton of questions on these things. And, you know, the manufacturer started putting bigger and bigger slide rooms in, and this thing goes out, and once it hits and you stop it, the motors don't get to sync. So if you've got a slide room that's got a refrigerator on one side and something very light, you know, on the other side, those motors are going to work differently. You know, this motor's going to really work hard, and this one's going to take off. And so, you know, the same thing with a couch on the, you know, everything's on the bottom, you got nothing on the top, and so the motors are working, and you know, the bottom's not keeping up. So what Schwintek's design is that you keep that button on till the room goes completely out, and you leave it on until it shuts itself off. Now that we sit there and go, I don't want to do that because I'm going to ruin the motor. No, that allows those motors to sync back into square, top to bottom, side to side, and do the same thing coming in. So what happens eventually is that you do this and you stop it, it's out of sync. You bring it in, you stop it, it's out of sync more, until the point where it's so out of sync that it's not working. And then you take it into the dealership, and the dealer's gotten so used to these motors being junk that they just replace the motors. And so the Schwintek guy's sitting there going, that's, you know, half of the repairs on these things were nothing more than just out of sync. If it's not a Schwintek, and then it's, and Lippert owns Schwintek, and they own Power Gear, and they own about everything out there, and they have their own proprietary brand. But so if it's not, and it's in the rail with rams, then there are adjustment bolts in those. And if you look on our site and just do a Google search, we did several videos on a toy hauler Raptor that had the inline Schwintek and how you could adjust those in and out. So hopefully you can find out which one you have. Because I know Winnebago did use Schwintek for a while, and then they went away from them because people just didn't know how they were working. Okay, so with that, I have no more questions. We are at 4:59. I think that's, yep, that is to the end of it. And I appreciate everybody coming out. We will, again, you saw the times next month that we are going to be on. We're going to do the gold stuff. And, you know, for those of you that are getting ready to go south for the wintertime, I envy you. For those of us that are going to rough it out, let's get our RVs winterized. There's still a little bit of time, I think, you know, the fall colors and the leaves turning and everything. You got football games going on, so there's tailgating and a lot of fun stuff like that. So anyway, I appreciate everybody coming out. My name's Dave Solberg. I will see you next month, and have a great weekend.